Dr. Emmanuel Manny Hostin, an orthopedic surgeon and husband of The View co-host Sonny Hostin, is accused in December lawsuit fraudulently billing insurance. By the way, this is a Daily Caller story I'm reading. The lawsuit alleges Hostin knowingly provided fraudulent medical and other healthcare services in exchange for kickbacks and or compensation, and names him among nearly 200 defendants in one of New York's largest RICO cases.
For more, we go to our chief Sonny Hostin correspondent for a reaction.
Sonny Hostin thought she was having a rough day. Maybe a minor PR hiccup, a little tabloid noise, a few keyboard warriors on Twitter. Then Greg Gutfeld and Tyrus showed up, not with sympathy, but with flamethrowers. And what followed wasn't a news segment. It was a full-blown roast session that made Comedy Central look like Sunday school. Her husband's alleged $450 million court scandal? That was just the appetizer. What came next?
31% of Americans trust our healthcare system. We have a terrible healthcare system. And, you know, doctors suffer because of big corporations as well. Doctors that want to do good, like my husband, you know, operates on someone even though they don't have insurance, and then has to sue health insurance companies to get paid for the work that he's been trained his whole life to do.
It is funny. She is so wrapped up in identity, and she had no idea who she
was. Public humiliation flambéed with irony, and Sonny, she was serving silent, Oscar-worthy reactions. Sonny Hostin may have expected a simple discussion, a few raised eyebrows, maybe some polite nodding from her co-host as they dissected the latest headlines. Instead, she walked into a media war zone where sarcasm was the weapon of choice. Greg Gutfeld, known for his quick wit and irreverent humor, didn't just offer commentary, he launched into a full-blown mockery. Tyrus, towering beside him, only added to the fire with his deadpan delivery. As the jokes piled on,
gets thrown back in her face. Today's video comes to us from Sonny Hostin. Sounds like a town. We're in Sonny Hostin. She was on PBS's Finding Your Roots, a show dedicated to researching celebrity ancestry. For context, Sonny is a staunch supporter of reparations and has made a fortune spewing nonsense about white privilege and racial justice. Well, turns out she's not as oppressed as she claims she is. She's actually the descendant of slave owners.
Sonny found herself in a relentless storm of biting humor. Gutfeld didn't pull punches. He sarcastically wondered aloud if Sonny was the moral compass of a lost society or just an unintentional comic relief. This wasn't just joking around. It was an expertly crafted roast designed to dissect her carefully constructed public persona. When you live by the sword of righteous indignation, you better be prepared to die by the sword of humor. Sonny, normally the expert interrupter and moral authority, now found herself silent, perhaps even questioning her choice of wardrobe that day. It wasn't just funny, it was an assassination. A sharp, sarcastic critique wrapped in humor. The irony was so thick that you could cut it with a butter knife. Sonny Hostin spent years on The View, grandstanding about the importance of accountability, criticizing others for not facing their own scandals, and lecturing on moral high grounds. She built a brand around holding the guilty accountable, specifically targeting public figures with less than savory histories. But when it was her own husband's multi-million-dollar courtroom drama that hit the headlines, it seemed the rules didn't apply. It was almost as if she had forgotten her own mantras. "Do as I say, not as I do," became her silent slogan. Sonny, who lectured everyone else about public integrity, suddenly found herself unable to comment on the family matters that were now under scrutiny. She couldn't even muster a defense, because how do you defend the indefensible? Instead of addressing the allegations head-on, she danced around the issue with vague platitudes about privacy and respect. The irony. Deliciously cruel. Here was a woman once the moral voice of public debates, now reduced to someone trying to avoid the conversation altogether. And the audience, they were loving every second of it. Sonny Hostin was the type of co-host on The View who wielded her opinions like a badge of honor. Whether it was the hot-button political topics or the latest social justice movement, Sonny always took the lead with righteous anger. However, when the spotlight turned inward, there was an awkward, uncomfortable pause. The same energy she once had when going after others seemed to vanish. On a panel that thrives on conflict, Sonny's silence was conspicuous. Suddenly, The View's panel, which was typically filled with outrage and heated exchanges, became a haven of non-committal shrugging and polite nods. Joy Behar, Whoopi Goldberg, and the others avoided the subject like it was radioactive. Not a single soul raised the uncomfortable question, "What's going on with your husband?" It was the ultimate example of media bias protecting their own. The hypocrisy didn't just show in their avoidance, it shouted from the rooftops. The same women who regularly called out conservative figures for their lack of accountability now suddenly had an extreme allergic reaction to the concept of facing their own scandals. It was a double standard, so massive it could have its own zip code. Gutfeld and Tyrus didn't just criticize Sunny, they delivered a full-throttle roast that could make stand-up comedians jealous. When Greg Gutfeld, the self-appointed king of sarcasm, sets his sights on someone, it's like watching a pro sniper. With cutting precision, he took aim at every contradiction in Sunny's public persona.
Hostin, who thinks climate change caused the solar eclipse, the dumbest of them all. Because everyone knows the moon caused the eclipse, which is controlled by the View's gravitational pull.
The metaphorical guns were blazing as he eviscerated her hypocrisy with barbed humor. "Isn't it rich," he mused, "that a woman who spends her life lecturing others about morality is now hiding behind legal mumbo-jumbo?" Tyrus, no stranger to throwing shade, joined in, adding his own twist with his signature deadpan humor.
That will go after white America and talk about them like dogs. That doesn't represent our ideals or values for anyone. And get rid of those people, and this will clear up real quick. So do you have to actually look in the mirror and clean up your own backyard and get the racist people out? Because that's who you allowed in. You allowed black racists on TV who could just go all day and say anything about white people. And I guess lo and behold, they forgot that there's a lot of people at home, white people at home during the day that are not watching your show anymore. So just clean it up.
Yeah, you know, Emily.
The roasting was relentless, brutal, and yet strangely entertaining. Tyrus wasn't just poking fun, he was performing a surgical strike, breaking down the illusion of moral superiority that Sunny had carefully curated. It was a takedown worthy of the most infamous celebrity roast. By the end of the segment, Sunny didn't look like a legal expert. She looked like an unwilling participant in a show she couldn't control. Sunny Hostin's claims of being a voice for marginalized communities were suddenly put under a harsh spotlight. Finding Your Roots, the PBS series, revealed that Sunny's own ancestry wasn't as progressive as she'd hoped. It turned out that some of her ancestors were slave owners. A moment of self-reflection? Maybe. But instead of grappling with the moral complexities of her heritage, Sunny brushed it off with a quick, dismissive, "Well, that's what they did back then." It was almost as if she hoped the audience would forget the significance of the moment. Meanwhile, Gutfeld and Tyrus didn't let this revelation slip by. They had a field day, pointing out the hypocrisy in her handling of the situation. Her own personal history collided with the politics she espoused, and rather than owning the uncomfortable truth, Sunny tried to hide behind it. This wasn't just a family history reveal, it was a public relations disaster. Gutfeld's sarcastic comments about how Sunny handled her roots were the cherry on top of a spectacle that was equal parts uncomfortable and hilarious. One of Sunny's strengths on The View was her ability to interject, interrupt, and dominate conversations with an authoritative tone. But suddenly, when the scandal broke about her husband's alleged dealings, she went into radio silence mode. No legal arguments, no factual rebuttals, no "let me explain the legal technicalities." Nothing. It was as if she had no talking points. This sudden quietness was striking. It was as though all her legal expertise had evaporated. Instead of countering the accusations, she deflected with platitudes about privacy and family matters. This wasn't just a silence, it was a strategic move to avoid the conversation. Her inability to speak on the topic made her vulnerability painfully evident. Gutfeld, of course, wasted no time in pointing out her strategic mute button. The audience was left wondering, had the woman who prided herself on being a legal authority suddenly lost her words? While Sunny may have sought refuge in silence, the public was ready to weigh in. The court of public opinion isn't known for being fair or forgiving, and Sunny's case was no exception. People on Twitter, social media, and various forums lit up with commentary. The court of public opinion handed down its verdict, hypocrisy. This was especially evident given her years of condemning public figures for their alleged wrongdoings, only for her own life to become a tangled web of legal issues. Sunny found herself on the wrong side of public trust. The media outlet that had made millions by analyzing and commenting on everyone else's behavior now found itself under scrutiny. Gutfeld played it brilliantly by pointing out the double standards in media coverage, and Sunny's inability to address the issue made her look even more out of touch with the very audience that once trusted her. Gutfeld wasn't done yet. He ended his segment with a flourish, making an over-the-top mocking invitation to Sunny. "If you ever want to come on my show and discuss accountability, we'd love to have you." The crowd was in stitches, and Sunny? She just stared at the camera, likely wondering if she had just signed up for the ultimate roast of her career. Gutfeld's line wasn't just funny, it was a pointed jab at her hypocrisy, a call to confront the issues she spent so much time dodging. The segment didn't just end, it sent a message. Sunny was not only being ridiculed, she was being asked to face the music, something she had avoided doing for far too long. When the scandal broke, The View had a serious decision to make. They could have addressed the issue head-on, openly discussed the allegations, and perhaps offered a moment of self-reflection, but that would have been too easy, and let's face it, too controversial for the network. Instead, they opted for radio silence. The hypocrisy was evident. Sunny's colleagues on the panel were more interested in protecting her than in holding her accountable. This wasn't just about one woman's scandal, it was about a larger pattern of media protectionism. The silence from the panel was deafening, and viewers noticed. Social media buzzed with accusations of bias, questioning whether the show had become nothing more than a PR machine for its stars. The ratings fluctuated, and Gutfeld made sure to point out that the show was trying to sweep the issue under the rug, an action that could come back to haunt them. When the revelation of Sunny's slave-owning ancestors surfaced, it was a bombshell. This was the woman who spoke tirelessly about reparations, about systemic racism, and about the injustices of history. And yet, when her own history was revealed to be entangled in the very system she decried, she chose to downplay it. Instead of engaging with the uncomfortable truth, she brushed it off with the kind of weak denial that made many people cringe. Gutfeld, with his signature sarcasm, didn't let the opportunity slip by. He mocked her attempt to avoid the confrontation, pointing out how her roots were now problematic. The refusal to take ownership of her past only highlighted the flaw in her public persona, a flaw that her critics were quick to point out. Sunny's body language spoke volumes. When the conversation turned to the scandal, her nervous tics became impossible to ignore. Her body stiffened, her posture closed up, and her facial expressions shifted from defiant to uncomfortable. Instead of the usual confident demeanor, she appeared visibly rattled. Gutfeld, ever the sharp observer, pointed out her evasive gestures, the hand-wringing, the exaggerated sips from her mug, and her sudden obsession with her notes. It was clear, Sunny was caught in the act of trying to pretend she wasn't feeling the heat. This whole ordeal wasn't just about Sunny, it was about the system of media elitism that had been exposed. While everyday people are held accountable for their actions, media personalities like Sunny had built careers by skating by on their charm and moral superiority. When the heat came down on her, her silence and deflection painted a picture of the protected class, those who operate above scrutiny. Gutfeld tore through the hypocrisy with razor-sharp commentary, exposing the contradictions in how the media handles scandals involving their own. Behind the scenes of The View, it was starting to look more like a daytime mafia. It wasn't about what was right, it was about protecting their own, no matter what. Sunny's scandal became a family matter, something to quietly bury, even as it made headlines. Meanwhile, the media continued its charade of journalistic integrity while playing favorites. This selective accountability only made the double standards even more glaring. In the end, it wasn't just a career setback for Sunny, it was a collapse of the smugness that she'd built her career on. The confidence she once displayed, the constant moral grandstanding, came crashing down in a heap of public ridicule and media hypocrisy. The cracks in her armor had finally been exposed for all to see. The irony wasn't just delicious, it was existential. Sunny, once the queen of daytime moral outrage, was now just another cautionary tale about the dangers of moral superiority without accountability.